How many times have you walked by an old house and wondered, who built it? Who lived there?
It would be such a loss. It would be less beauty and less heart. I was a friend of your mother's, and if she was sitting on that porch, I'd go up and sit there, and we'd just sit on the porch and watch life go by. Oh. And it was so pleasant, and we just sort of belonged in the neighborhood.
My mother lived in this house, and my mother lived in this house for many, many years. And all the time that my mother was living in this house, I never bothered to question who built the house, what the history of the house was. And then, of course, when my mother died, I thought, what am I going to do? I can't imagine selling this to somebody who would destroy it. The details that I love about this house are, first of all, the veranda. It's a wraparound veranda. It's that transition between the outside and the inside. I love the radiators, the old boiler. There's a boiler downstairs that is probably circa 1900. I'm exaggerating, but it's a very old boiler. The windows, there's I think they call it an eyebrow window, I'm not sure. But the other windows that have beautiful moldings. There are features that you just get used to, and you think, somebody was thinking when they designed this house. They were thinking of the details.
This is a good classical example of a building of its time that's quite rare in Edmonton. So we'd like to keep as many as we can while they're all being demolished. So what we have, we'll keep. Mm-hmm. It's a fantastic building. Thank God you bought it.
How do you keep a house? How do you save a house? And because the original plans of the house that had the name for whom it was built and the name of the architect, I had two leads and thinking, if I follow those leads, I'll be able to find some information about the house that might give it historic designation. That means that the house cannot be destroyed. The exterior of the house has to be taken back to the original.
I think this is all arranged alphabetically.
And so I started.
For Edmonton, but here's Herbert Alton Magoon.
Mr. Magoon.
Mr. Magoon, the lead architect on your house.
I started with the archives, the city archives, the provincial archives, and talked to anybody and everybody. And finally, the path was opened. After 6 months of researching, I have found out everything about this place. It was Mrs. Margaret Martin who built it in 1907. And it's a fascinating story.
Margaret Martin's family came from Scotland via the United States and settled in southern Ontario. At the age of 20, she marries, 21, she marries, and her husband go to North Dakota and homestead. They homestead for 20 years. Things get tough in North Dakota, or things are better in northern Alberta. And the family comes to Alberta.
They farmed there. Mr. Martin was there for about a year and then died. Mrs. Martin was left with 10 living children. She had actually 13 children. 2 of them must have died in North Dakota. And a third one, just as they came into Edmonton, one of the daughters dies. So she is left with 10 living children. I have to assume that she stayed on the farm for a couple of years. And then she probably sold off some of the farmland, taking advantage of Alberta's land boom. She moved from the farm to Strathcona. It is really the beginning of Edmonton. She's moved into one of the up-and-coming areas. And lo and behold, she is building a 2.5-story brick building. In my research to date, this is the first house that was built by a woman in Strathcona. I'm more and more fascinated by her, and I wish I could get to know more about her. My mom was a little bit like Mrs. Martin in that they're survivors. They were both left widows, and they had to survive, and they had to find a way of surviving. There were those connections during my research.
So initially you started looking for the husband.
Yes.
Yes, expecting that those were the traces you would find, evidence.
In trying to build a context for Margaret Martin, I met Kathy Kavanagh, who teaches women's studies.
It is interesting when we begin to ask questions about women and we begin to look for women, they emerge, they appear. So they have been made invisible by a process around who considers what to be important to history, largely about men and, wars and the economy. She does not return to Ontario. That might be an obvious thing. Following the death of her husband, she has a lot of wealth now, money, and she might easily have moved back to Ontario. But she chooses instead to remain in Edmonton, and that tells us something. And she chooses to move into one of the city's more prestigious communities, a smart street, and a large brick home.
$5,000.
This house is modern, so that would mean I'm trying to establish how much Mrs. Martin's house might have been built for.
Yeah.
I think that she probably
my
paid around
goodness.
$5,000 to have it done.
To have it
built. She hires Mr. Magoon, who is a very important architect at the time.
Mrs. Blaney and Mrs. Nobles.
He built the church where Mrs. Martin goes, Knox Presbyterian, which is 2 blocks away. He built many, many buildings. She finds one of the more prominent architects in town. She certainly had a vision of who she wanted to be and where she wanted to go. And let's try and see
what might be.
what's left of
What's left?
Yeah.
Yeah, there isn't. They've got rid of so many of this in the 1960s.
Is that when that
I
happened?
think a lot of this came up just by the building design. Have you got a designation on your house?
It's coming.
Too? It's coming.
I hope
Okay.
it's coming
Oh, great.
for
Oh, yeah.
residents.
And look at it. It had a turret on
I've been
it.
especially fortunate at the City Archives to work with Kim Christie Milley.
In here with a big porch on the
She
back.
knows how much Strathcona has changed.
Which is no longer there. Bard is still up here.
Yes.
And it's another beautiful property. Oh, here we go.
Here we go.
There it is. And this actually shows the old house. This is
Oh.
beautiful. So you can tell it has not changed a bit.
No.
Yeah, just a beautiful 1912. So they're all the same era house in here. We go around the neighborhood and we see the plaques on the houses. Those are all houses that belong to men. But this plaque will say Mrs. Martin, and it will tell something about Mrs. Martin and her place in the community, because truly it was her house. It wasn't her husband's house.
And then in the summer, what's wonderful, it says blocks.
David Holdworth from the city has been helping me through this process of historic designation.
Almost joins the other tree. It's really, I mean, look how quickly it got green. It's just amazing.
Well, I don't think anyone would cut it down. It would take them all week if they had to cut that down.
I think so. The Martins planted it. And a couple of years ago, the Edmonton Journal came and took a picture of my mother. And then they wrote an article saying that it had one of the biggest girths in Edmonton as a tree.
Well, our designation wouldn't tie it in the tree, but because it's part of the whole parcel, we'd keep an eye on it.
Would you? It should be also heritage.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Everything should be heritage.
Every time a house goes, it's part of history that's gone. And that, I think, robs us of a texture, this connection with the past.
That's sagging the most. That seems to have the wow in it.
You build up a picture of what life was like. One of the gaps in my research has been information about teas. Teas were very important, as I found out as I looked in the social columns.
Over the teacups, with fragrant flowers adding a charm to the tea table where Mrs. J. Hamilton MacDonald poured tea and Mrs. D.L. Campbell cut the ices.
Oh,
What's
nice,
that?
the ices. Is that like a cake?
I don't know.
It must be a little cake.
I brought a delightful afternoon to an end.
Isn't that nice?
I've decided for the film that I would try and recreate a parlor from about 1905 and set it up as it would look for a tea. Every week, definitely every week, a big tea happened. I mean, you could have 100 women coming to your tea. It was to be seen and to see other people. The other level of teas, apparently, were called pink teas. And this was for women who were organizing, and this might be even the WCTU women, because they strategized at these teas.
Why don't you read this, Kim?
Okay, an enjoyable, helpful gathering of the WCTU. It's Christian Temperance Union.
Women's Christian
Held-
Temperance Union, yeah.
Held at the home of Mrs. Martin last Tuesday afternoon. Took the form of a reception. About 40 ladies were present.
What's interesting for me is that even though I've known about the WCTU for years, I always thought it was just strictly, a group of women out to close all the bars
Stop
and everything.
drinking.
Stop drinking.
Yes, stop drinking.
But here, it's a much wider agenda.
They're doing way more than temperance. I mean, it's everything that concerns women.
So you have teas in the parlor, and people are doing politics. I mean, it's political. They were involved in the suffragette movement, in getting the women's vote.
Where do women have opportunities to meet, to gather? In order to become active politically, they need to get together. They don't have access to public spaces. It's not acceptable, for example, at that time, that they might rent a meeting room in a hotel and women would gather there. The place that is available to them is their homes. So, for example, in the early 1920s, about 1922, when Emily Murphy decides to organize around the exclusion of women from appointment to the Senate, what does she do? She invites other women to tea at her home. As a result of that tea, some 10 years later, all women in Canada are recognized as persons and eligible for appointment to the Senate. So it seems an innocuous thing. It seems almost a stereotypical thing that women will have tea. But in fact, change happens because women get together and have tea.
Margaret Martin is a good example of a woman who took widowhood in her stride, really, and then became very involved in what was happening. It was education, it was the social welfare because of the mission, it was the vote for women because of the Women's Christian Temperance Union. This is an activist.
After 9 months of researching and doing everything the city asked me to do, I went to City Hall on April the 19th and was able to hear the House declared a historic resource.
We have the third reading of File 13971 to designate the Margaret Martin residence at 8324 26th Street as a municipal historic resource.
Second. Thank you, Councillor.
I was content because not only had I done my research, but that the house was going to be saved. No, I was elated that the house was going to be saved.
I think that's going to be fascinating when the plaque comes on, the information comes on to that house. People will see this is a woman of Strathcona who had some prominence. And maybe that'll inspire them to look for other women in Strathcona who maybe have not been recognized and maybe need to get some recognition out there.
What were you saying about the wall? What were you going to do with that wall?
Well, behind the wall right now, it's buried, are two columns, one on each side of a lovely... The minute I saw it, I saw the potential of it, and I just knew it was worth a good close look at. And we didn't even need a close look at it. I fell in love with it right away.
Come back a second time.
Didn't need to.
So let's go into this hallway. I want to see where this tapestry is going to be. The new owners, Rick and Brenda Hyam, they came through the house and they didn't come back and they made an offer.
In order to get it to fit, it'll go right to the corner there.
They immediately told me that they were going to restore the house. I found out they were both very interested in history.
That far? In order.
They're so enthusiastic.
Actually enhances the dining room.
I know when there's something special, you have to move fast.
Yeah,
and I think we were fortunate. So we will be the new owners, and the challenge is just tremendous. Was this a pocket door? You can see a bit of an indent. It's been a matter of experiencing the grandeur of that era and the life that people had in this country that, you know, we go to Europe to find. And then a bench underneath and a little table.
I can hardly wait to come back.
Margaret Martin lived in the house until 1940. She was 86 years old when she died. And then my mother bought the house in the 1950s. And so now it's the end of another era. And hopefully, it'll last another 100 years.